Welcome back to the Gearhead Lounge. Today's cult classic car flick is one of the cultiest classics I've ever watched, and that movie is The Wraith. Currently holding a rating of 38% on Rotten Tomatoes, this movie is a 1986 action fantasy film directed by Mike Marvin that stars a young Charlie Sheen, Nick Cassavetes, Sherilyn Fenn, and one of Dodge's hottest prototype cars of the 1980s, the M4S, also known as the Turbo Interceptor PPG, which plays the Wraith. Now, the movie begins with four shooting stars ascending from space, racing along the roads. They all crash together at a four-way crossing that brings the M4S to life. Standing next to it is what can best be described as the Stig of the Netherworld. Now, the story takes place in a small town of Brooks, Arizona, where a gang of car thieves led by Packard Walsh terrorizes the community by forcing people with supposedly fast cars to race against their supposedly fast cars. The winner takes the loser's car, but obviously Packard and his crew play dirty to win by any means necessary. Packard's controlling personality intimidates everyone in his circle, including his obsession, Carrie Johnson, who doesn't know her boyfriend Jamie Hankins was murdered by the gang. Enter Jake Kesey, a mysterious motorcyclist, arrives in town and befriends Billy Hankins, which is Jamie's brother, and Carrie. Now, this is where you see Packard's possessive personality spew forth as he constantly pushes away any male interest from Carrie and forces her to ride with him in his car and pretty much tells her that if he can't be her man, then no one will be. So after a few more scenes of intimidation from Packard, in fact, he's about to take Billy's car, the Wraith shows up at a popular burger joint and revs on Packard's crew, where they give chase to the spot for a race.
Rex, you ever seen one of those before?
Let's just add it to our collection first. We can figure out what it is second.
One of Packard's lapdogs, Augie, in one of the several Dodge Daytonas seen in this movie, lines up next to him to take him down. During the race, the Wraith shoots ahead and ends up in Augie's path, causing him to T-bone the Wraith, appearing to destroy both cars in the process. Augie goes over the cliff in flames, because that's what you do in a 1980s movie, but the Wraith reappears and drives away. This starts a series of instances where the Wraith systematically takes out each of the gang members, except for this guy named Rughead, who didn't participate in the murder.
We must drink. This is Tranya.
During this time, Jake and Carrie get closer and closer. It's starting to become apparent that Jake is not only the Wraith, but also Carrie's deceased boyfriend Jamie, coming back from the dead to avenge his death. The conflict climaxes in a final race between Jake and Packard that culminates into a game of chicken between the Wraith and Packard, and spoiler alert, Packard doesn't survive. Jake shows back up at Carrie's house to reveal his true identity to her and tells her that he has one more thing to do. He drives over to the burger joint hangout and gives the M4S to Billy, who figures out who Jake is as he rides off on his motorcycle. Jake returns to Carrie's house to claim his prize, where they ride off into the full moon in the distance. Once again, this movie is the epitome of 1980s pop culture. Charlie Sheen, Randy Quaid as the no-nonsense sheriff, the soundtrack featuring the likes of Ozzy Osbourne, Billy Idol, Motley Crue, and Bonnie Tyler, just to name a few. The cars are your typical fare of slow cars that have no business being race cars in their current forms. Let's take a look at the main cars in the movie. First, there's the 66 Plymouth Barracuda driven by the Gutter Boys. It's your typical rat rod driven by a couple of Stray Cats rejects. I can't tell if it's a 6 or an 8 cylinder, and it never gets raced. So next, there's at least 3 Dodge Daytonas, 2 86s, and 1 87. And in fact, there's even a pre-production Dodge Shadow in there somewhere. Now the 87 Dodge Daytona is missing the hood, and it appears that it could be like a Daytona Shelby Z with the 146 horsepower turbocharged 2.2 liter 4-cylinder engine. The next car is a 1977 Pontiac. Either it's a Formula or Trans Am. It's hard to tell. I'm leaning towards a Formula, but it doesn't have the Formula hood, but that could always have been swapped out. You can't tell what engine is in it, but it's probably a Pontiac 400 or an Olds 403. Now, it appears to be topped by a 671 blower, but on further inspection, you find out that it doesn't even work. Perhaps it's one of those elusive Mad Max blowers that work on demand. But you'll notice that even during the race, that the belt isn't even turning the impeller. Now, someone posted a picture on a forum that shows that it's a dummy blower bolted to the air cleaner. Now, the bodywork is finished off with a Porsche-style whale tail. Then there's Packard's 1977 Corvette. Well, the internet calls it 77, and I'm inclined to believe it. While it does have the louvers in the back for the 78 to 82 type Corvette, you can clearly see the flying buttress pillars that was typical of the 68 to 77 Vettes. The front clip appears to be maybe a Greenwood setup with the inset headlights and the slightly bulged front fenders, but the rear is an early C4 bumper grafted on, and it seriously looks out of place to me. Now, Rughead, Packard's wrench, was building an engine for the Corvette. In the scene where the Wraith shows up to shoot up the shop, you can clearly see Packard's new engine on a hoist, and it's a blown 426 Hemi. That would have been an interesting swap. Now let's take a look at the star car, the M4S Turbo Interceptor, or M4S Turbo Interceptor PPG. The M4S, that stands for Mid-Engine 4-Cylinder Sport, was developed in 1981 by Chrysler and PPG, with Chrysler designer Bob Ackerman heading up the design team. The M4S highlights a monocoque chassis, a slick body with a drag coefficient of 0.23, and a $30,000 PPG paint job. Powered by a Cosworth modified 2.2 liter 4-cylinder engine, not this breathing monstrosity you see in the movie that confused the hell out of Rughead. The real engine featured a dual overhead cam cylinder head and twin turbos that produced 440 horsepower under 25 pounds of boost, fed through a 5-speed manual transmission. The fuel injection research eventually filtered down to develop the 2.2 turbo used in the IROC Daytona and Spirit RT. Performance numbers was 0 to 60 in 4.1 seconds and a top speed of 195 miles an hour. Now, before the movie, the M4S served as a pace car for the IndyCar World Series. For the movie, they built 4 replicas for various stunts and crash sequences. The hero car was the real M4S that was used for close-ups. Now, after the movie, the M4S went back to being a pace car for a while and was retired to the Walter P. Chrysler Museum until it closed in 2016. After that, it went into a private collection where it is rarely seen anymore. But there is, strangely enough, a company out there called MWI Supercar that makes a pretty decent replica. I don't know what they use for the base or if they do like their own chassis or something, but it looks pretty close. I'd like, 95%. In the movie, there aren't really any good car sounds or anything for like a real gearhead to drool over. As the sound effects for the M4S sounds like the sound effect that an electric car would make to placate petrol heads that have to have an engine sound, and the rest of the cars just sound average. Now, for my taste, this movie is less of a horror movie and it's more sci-fi. I think the best way to categorize this is Ghost Rider meets Fast and Furious. Now, in my opinion, All of the cars in this movie are pretty hokey except for the M4S, but it's your typical 1980s low-budget flick that's good for an afternoon viewing. You can find it on YouTube and watch it for free. That's gonna be it for this one. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe if you want to binge some good automotive content. We'll see you guys later. Take care.